Good morning. This is the Reverend Lois Keen, priest in charge at St. Peter's Trinity Episcopal Church in Thomaston, Connecticut. And this is the sermon for this coming Sunday, July 19. Don't ever apologize for what little you have and what little you are. Don't ever apologize for that. God is well apprised of who we are and what we bring to the table of life. That is our offering. By Brother Curtis Almquist of the Society of St. John Evangelist, 2017. Last week we heard the gospel parable about the farmer who sows seed so recklessly that most of it falls on places like the rocks and weedy patches and hard-packed, unprepared dirt where it can't possibly grow. Today's gospel also flies in the face of good farming practice. Any one of us who has a garden knows that to leave the weeds in the garden is to sap nutrients from the plants you hope to grow, and even to strangle the life out of them. Why would Jesus the gardener want to do this, leaving the weeds to be gathered with whatever crop survives the predation of the satanic weeds and then sort them out at the end of time? I dare say, as a gardener myself, that Jesus will have precious little good crop if that's the case. Maybe he gave this explanation to the disciples because of their thick minds and slow wits. I say their thick minds and slow wits because here is Jesus living these parables right before their eyes. He preaches to anyone within hearing, including Sadducees, scribes, and Pharisees, most of whom have no inclination to listen, much less learn and inwardly digest what he is saying. And he lives side by side with all sorts of people. His own disciples have among them Matthew the tax collector, Simon the religious terrorist called the Zealot, fisher folk, and I don't even want to know why the brothers James and John are called the sons of thunder, and the women. Whilst Jesus has named 12 men of the motley crew to represent the 12 tribes of Israel, these 12 were not his only disciples. These were those like the rich young ruler and the widow whose son Jesus raised from the dead, and the Magdalene who he healed of mental illness, and countless other women who had no place in any reputable discipleship. And yet, here you will find them if you read the whole of each of the Gospels, following Jesus, sitting at his feet, learning from him, and seeing to the daily needs of Jesus and the men. When Jesus tells the crowds the parable about the wheat and the weeds, he places before them the image of those who are following and learning from him. And here, he says, is the household of God. So you too are here, he is saying, if you will accept rubbing elbows with the great unwashed. In this country, we have been for some long time now grown further and further polarized. Each of us knows what is right in our eyes, and each of us knows his neighbor is wrong, dim-witted, thick-skulled. Everywhere I go, not only churches, but to civic organizations to which I belong, I am asked how we can change our polarized conversations to be more civil. While we each hold dearly to our own beliefs and idea of what makes a country great and defends it rigorously, there is a realization among many that we are getting nowhere, in part because we will not give airspace to those we deem to be our opponents. This is not to say that it is okay that racism, sexism, hatred of others who are not like us, vilifying strangers, and reacting with violence against those we fear abound in not only this country but the world as a whole. These things are not okay. It is to say that none of this will change until we can talk with one another in some way that will reveal the depths of what makes us hate and fear one another. I would say this hate and fear and incivility is indeed the devil's work. And I acknowledge that the evil one is at work even in myself. Try as I may to keep my fears and, yes, my anger from ruling my tongue when I speak, or my fingers when I type out a rapier-sharp riposte. This is where I take you back to last Sunday's sermon and the deceptively tiny 3 contemplative words I gave you. Open my heart. Last week I made space for you to sit with these 3 words, letting you get used to those 3 words, open my heart. I invited you to use this phrase a few minutes a day or several many times during the day to put yourself at God's disposal, that the Holy Spirit might use your openness for her purposes of reconciliation and renewal of all creation. Today I want to expand on the practice of putting ourselves at God's disposal. The Holy Trinity, one God, can do more than we can even imagine with even a brief few seconds if we will make ourselves available. Here's how this works. I have been practicing contemplation for a long time. From time to time, I have felt a great need to stop. Just stop. I'd be walking through an empty church and suddenly there's that call to stop. I'd be at my work and stop. I'd be at the checkout line in the Stop and Shop and there's that feeling that I must stop. At first I had no idea where the idea came from or for what purpose, and for a long time I ignored it. Then one day I paid attention and I did stop. I felt kind of silly, and it lasted only a few moments, not even a minute. But it became part of a habit. Over time, it occurred to me that God might be asking me to just be still and open so the Holy Spirit could pray through me for someone or some purpose somewhere unknown to me. It's like living St. Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 8, verse 26. The very Spirit intercedes with sighs too deep for words, and God knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes according to the will of God. Recently, I have learned to expand on this experience. Thinking or saying or chanting the words, open my heart, we can begin to envision our hearts open to God's Spirit, and then imagine our heart being filled with love, and then being open to the needs of the whole world. Good wheat, unwanted weeds, all sorts and conditions of women and men, sublime nature red in tooth and claw, the whole mixed condition of all creation is encompassed in this one small contemplative action of actively asking for our hearts to be opened. While Matthew's gospel says that at the end of time the weeds will be cast into the fires of hell, Jesus instead broke his heart and literally had his body broken for us, that all should be drawn to him in the love that made and sustains all being and all things. The eventual end of this contemplation, open my heart, is the possibility of our hearts being broken open for that God Spirit to increase the power of love for the healing of all things. I know it doesn't seem like much. Don't ever apologize for that. God knows very well who you are and what you bring to the table of life. As small as it seems, this is our offering. By God's grace, through the power of the Holy Spirit, it is enough, and it will be more than enough. God bless you. God keep you. God make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. God lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace today and always.